Welcome to Hull on Estates, a series of podcasts for the Canadian legal community dealing with issues and insights surrounding estate planning in Canada. Hosted by the lawyers of Hull and Hull, the podcast will touch on some key considerations when planning estates and wills. Now, here are today's hosts.
Hi, I'm Jonathon Kappy.
And I'm Sara Moledina.
Welcome to Hull on Estates. You're listening to episode number 656. Today, we are going to be discussing a number of real estate issues that come into effect in 2023 and how they may affect estate issues. So first of all, Happy New Year. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How was your New Year's?
It was fun. You know, the weather was pretty mild, so not so bad.
Yeah, I agree. It was nice to relax and, great week back.
Good. So I think that we've got a couple of different topics. We're not going to get too deep into any of them, but I do think it's really important that we raise them for the people that are watching or listening to the podcast, just so they are identified. And if they affect you, then you can do a deeper dive into it. But I do think that they are worthwhile to at least be aware of, so that you can, look into them if they affect you, your practice, or you personally. So the first one we want to talk about is a vacant home tax. So it is a new tax that's going to be imposed on residential property, and it's going to be a tax of 1% on the value of the property if a property is vacant for more than 6 months of any particular year. And clearly it's designed to prevent the underuse of residential property. Listen, it's a straight tax. And so one of the issues I think that we're going to run into is in the estates practice. So someone passes away and their house is now vacant, right? We know that probate can sometimes take 6 months. Even if it takes less, it will certainly take longer than that to apply for probate and sell the property. And whether or not that is going to create a situation where more estates or most estates are going to be subject to these 1% vacant home taxes. So it's brand new. We don't really know all the details yet, or we haven't done a deep dive into them. But I think it's important to remember for sort of regular people listening to this, that vacant principal residents are exempt from the tax. Okay, so you can only have one principal residence. But if you have a principal residence and you move out for 9 months, but that is still your designated principal residence, because on your income tax you have to designate where your principal residence is, that can be vacant for more than 6 months without being subject to the tax.
Okay.
But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with respect to estates when people die and you have these vacant properties, these vacant residential properties. I mean, once you die, it can no longer be your principal residence, so it loses that designation, and whether or not that's going to affect this tax. So you've got an interesting one to talk about. Why don't you talk about the ban on certain people buying residential real estate in this country?
So yeah, this is obviously very new as well. So on April 28th, the federal government introduced Bill C-19, called an Act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on April 7, 2022, and other measures. So this act will come into force on January 1st, 2023, and will be in effect for 2 years before it is repealed. So per Section 4 of the Act, it is prohibited for a non-Canadian to purchase directly or indirectly any residential property. So this basically impacts non-Canadians, because non-Canadians now cannot purchase any property in Canada for 2 years.
Residential property, right?
Yeah, residential. So now who is a non-Canadian? A non-Canadian is defined as an individual who is neither a Canadian nor a person registered as an Indian under the Indian Act, nor a permanent resident, or a corporation that is incorporated otherwise and under the laws of Canada, or a province, or a corporation incorporated under laws of Canada whose shares are not listed on the stock exchange, or a prescribed person or entity. The exceptions are temporary residents within the meaning of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, or non-Canadians who purchase property with a Canadian spouse, or people registered under the Indian Act. So what happens if you do actually purchase a property, there is a fine, and you are guilty of an offense and liable on summary conviction to a fine of not more than $10,000. Additionally, a court can order the sale of the property purchased as the court sees fit. But this does not apply, the prohibition does not apply if a non-Canadian enters into agreement of purchase of sale of the residential property before January 1st, 2023. So anything that happened in 2022 doesn't count.
Yeah, it's going to be sort of interesting. I know that, sometimes when you're dealing with foreign buyers and you're talking about remittances, they really put the onus on the purchaser to help police these things. So from what you were explaining, it doesn't look like they're putting into that onus on the seller to make sure that the person they're selling to is not a non-resident. It is going to be up to an agency to police that and impose fines. And obviously, one of the other options is to compel the sale of that property. So we're interesting to see how that one unfolds. An interesting piece of legislation, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly.
And so obviously that will impact the states, when dealing with selling residential property. You have a smaller market for who's willing to buy. Whether or not that softens the real estate market is, something that will be determined in the future.
For sure.
So the last piece of sort of real estate news that we wanted to share relates to a new anti-flipping measure that's coming in and intended to target people who buy, fix up, flip property. Listen, it's always a gray area as to, when someone buys and sells property in a short period of time, is it a capital gain? Is it a principal residence subject to, non-payment of capital gains tax? Is it income? What was its purpose? And so the new anti-flipping regime is designed to take a person who owns property for less than 12 months and deems it to be that is income, not capital gains. All right. So it sounds to me like it's a rebuttable presumption that's intended, because ordinarily in a normal circumstance, the CRA always had the burden to prove that this was income, this wasn't capital gains. And listen, the court have, considered a number of factors, taxpayers' intention, the nature of the business or the profession, was money borrowed to acquire the property, the length of time that it was held, the factors motivating the sale, and the court would weigh all of those factors and say, well, was this really a money-making opportunity, a business income, or was this intended to be your home and therefore you are subject to capital gains tax? And was it for income or was it for a different purpose? So now with these anti-flipping rules, it is going to be deemed to be income where you hold the property or own the property for less than a year. But it sounds like it is subject to being disproved on a balance of probabilities if the person can show why it was sold and that it's not income. Listen, and there are exceptions. I mean, there are clear exceptions to the anti-flipping measure, which deal with circumstances that arrive in life. Death, serious illness or disability, birth of a child, loss of a job or relocation, a divorce, insolvency, threat to personal safety, and property destruction. All those sound like very reasonable circumstances that could arise that would lead you to get rid of a property even though you hadn't lived there very long, and without it intending to be an income flip for designed to make money, but actually to move where you want to live. So, listen, I don't necessarily think that it's going to affect estates so much, but it's definitely one of those ones where it's something to keep in mind. It's something that's brand new, and it's just something to be aware of, because some people do it, some people don't, but it's no longer just a given that it's a capital gains tax. So, welcome to 2023. These are some of the new real estate landscapes that you have to navigate. If any of them apply to you, we highly recommend that you do a deeper dive and start reading into these things. Obviously, there are statutes, but they're untested, and there aren't a lot of examples yet of how the statute is going to be applied, but you should at least take it into consideration. But I think that concludes our podcast for today. Until next time, we want to thank you for listening. I am Jonathon Kappy.
And I'm Sara Moledina.
Should you have any questions, please email us at info@hullandhull.com or contact us through the contact page on our website. Have a great day.
This has been Hull on Estates with the lawyers of Hull and Hull. The podcast you have been listening to has been provided as an information service. It is a summary of current legal issues in estates and estate planning. It is not legal advice, and you are reminded to always talk with a legal professional regarding your specific circumstances. To listen to other podcasts or to leave a question or comment, please visit our website at hullandhull.com. Our theme music is Upper Structure by DJ A Kid and is courtesy of the PodSafe Music Network.